Watching the Major, UMPs were used a lot, definitely more so than any other SMG. Is the weapon overpowered? For a start, let's look at what you'd expect from the SMG class, which is where it can be bought from. You typically expect these weapons to be cheap, low damage, low accuracy guns that spam a lot of bullets very quickly. They're generally used against unarmoured opponents in close quarter situations, since damage with them drops off rather quickly. But the UMP-45 is a bit different from your average SMG. I'd argue that in close quarters combat, it behaves a lot more like a rifle, and a surprisingly powerful one at that. But its real selling point is that you can get both it and full armour for less than the cost of a FAMAS. I saw it being used by both sides in the Major in buy rounds where a player couldn't afford an AK or M4. Typically, if your team can't all full buy, then you might instead choose to save for the next round. But the current CSGO meta suggests that it's better in some cases to buy, even if some players are too low to have a full rifle armour buy. The UMP provides a budget alternative while retaining a lot of the perks, and having this option certainly keeps the other team on their toes and unsure whether to prepare against pistols or automatic weapons. As well as being cheap, another perk of using the UMP-45 is for its $600 kill reward, which is double that you get from proper rifles. It covers the cost of the entire weapon in just 2 kills. You'd have to kill 8 people with a FAMAS for it to pay for itself. And 48 with the AWP. You also run faster with the UMP than with any of the rifles, and believe it or not, its base damage is greater than any rifle apart from the AK-47. Does this mean we should all forget the rifles and opt for the UMP instead? No, don't be silly. Even if the weapon had served a player faithfully in the Major, these players would still prefer an AK or M4, and indeed picked up drop rifles as soon as they had the chance. Because what you don't get with the UMP is the accuracy or distant damage values that you would get from proper rifles. In fact, even for an SMG it is inaccurate, and although it can kill unhelmeted enemies in one shot from 1,000 units, the most damage you can inflict against helmeted foes is 90, requiring you to land at least 2 good shots against brought up enemies. Oddly, it's the 3rd most accurate weapon for firing if you're stood on a ladder, ranked behind only the MAC-10 and revolver. But yeah, most situations it is bad. Add to this its limited ammo capacity, and the UMP seems like the worst of both worlds. It's still a lot better for running and gunning than any proper rifle though. Its recoil pattern is also very easy to control. The first 5 to 6 bullets don't deviate from the crosshair too much, and if spraying, the second half of the magazine all lands in roughly the same place, making it one of the easiest automatic weapons to spray with.
Those UMPs, definitely not bad against armour. I think they have the best armour penetration of all the SMGs, if I'm not mistaken.
You're mistaken. The P90 is technically better by 4%. But don't worry, I get what you're saying, since the UMP is still the best SMG against armour thanks to its higher base damage. This allows it to compete even against proper rifles against armoured opponents in close quarters combat, making the UMP-45 an excellent choice for rushing B tunnels as CTs, if that's your sort of thing. The real downside of the weapon is the damage drop-off, something that unfortunately nerfs all SMGs. Combined with the poor accuracy, it makes the UMP useless at mid-range or beyond, though that didn't stop players in the Major from scoring some impressive kills with the device. Other things include its inferior wallbanging ability and limited bullet range. Beyond 3,700 units, the damage will drop to 0, whereas rifles can be fired over 8,000. Though admittedly there are very few situations where you'll be further than 3,700 units from an enemy, and it'll be pretty obvious that using an SMG from this distance isn't the best of ideas. Despite all this, it's apparent from its stats that it has a viable use in competitive play, and was used in the Major to great effect. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Valve nerfing this weapon soon, as I feel it renders all other SMGs rather obsolete given its low price. But why haven't we seen it being used that much until now? Well, the UMP didn't used to be as good as it currently is. At the game's release, it cost $1,500, couldn't penetrate armour as well, and had a more difficult recoil pattern. But in May 2013, its price was dropped to current levels and had a tighter recoil pattern, so you don't have to compensate horizontally as much, which Sloth Squadron kindly generated for me here. In October of 2014, almost all SMGs got improvements to their armour penetration, which made them all a lot more viable. It was then that the UMP-45 became the killing machine that we know it as today. And yet it still wasn't used much. Why? In short, the CZ-75 stole the stage. Introduced 8 months earlier, it was like a budget version of the UMP-45 for those who like to eco but still have the firepower of a full-blown rifle. It originally cost $300, although it was up to $500 in September, a month before the SMG improvements, could one-shot kill helmeted opponents, and dealt more damage than most of the other pistols. How could you argue with that? A deadly weapon that paid for itself in just 1 kill. Suddenly, the $1,200 for the UMP seems overpriced. But then in December, the CZ was nerfed in almost every way. We were all pleased about this, but once again, didn't immediately appreciate the UMP-45 for what it had become because at that point, the Tech 9 was still pretty dominant. Plus, the CZ saw some of its nerfs reverted the following month. The reality is that the UMP is a fantastic deal and has been for years, but people are only just realising its full potential now. When you can get it and full armour for the cost of a budget rifle that you don't really want anyway, or it, full armour and full nades for the cost of a proper rifle, you can see its appeal. You'll forget that eco rounds are even a thing.